Everybody feels it, like maybe it's even real. And the kids, they think it is real. Okay? So, let's talk about the time. This will help you in your own life, believe me. The ancients divided up the world into 4 ages. They said there was once a golden age. This is in the garden probably, when everything was great. You didn't age. There was plenty to eat. Everyone was nice to each other. That must have been a nice world. But the golden age, after a while, begins to deteriorate into what they called the silver age, which is where corruption starts to move into the system and things begin to slowly fall apart. As the silver age goes on, it deteriorates into what they called the bronze age. These are not iron ages from science. This is alchemical lingo. And then finally, it falls into what they called the worst age of all, the Iron Age, the Kali Yuga, the time of death, plague, destruction, war, lies, corruption, when nothing is true. Everybody's lying. Everybody's out for themselves. I wonder what time period that could be. So I got interested in this, and I drew out my torus to try to understand the flow of time, and I began to realize that I had actually discovered the current of time. So when you come out the golden age, the spiral of time, each spiral on the time current widens, right? Until it gets to the rim here, and it keeps widening all across until it hits the equator, right? Now, after it hits the equator, the spirals begin condensing. Each spin on the spiral up is shorter, tinier, faster. When it spills over the lip into the Bronze Age, it begins spiraling quicker now, right? Quicker and quicker and quicker. It gets down to the Iron Age, and it's tightening and tightening and tightening until it hits this null point and has to pierce through the null point and get out through the other side again. Now, here's what's interesting. Each one of these ages is 6,500 years. The Golden Age lasts 6,500 years, Silver Age lasts 6,500 years, the Bronze Age and the Iron Age all last 6,500 years. And this is the 26,000 year long cycle. You start at the Golden Age, 6,500 years is your to the equator is your first age. The 6,500 years later, you start to spill over the top. You begin going down very fast through the rapids. As you reach the bottom, you hit the Iron Age, and then the whole cycle begins again. And that Iron Age, that little triangle, is 6,500 years long, just like the Golden Age. Yet everything is crammed in to that little Iron Age. All of human history, 6,500 years ago, when we domesticated cattle, the first civilizations in Africa, in Sumeria, okay, we're beginning, the first cities. All that is just this little area. Everything else, you know, we don't have any records of, not really. But Jared Diamond, the archaeologist, he went back and he looked at skulls and skeletons of people that lived 15,000 years ago, 18,000 years ago. And what he found was exactly the opposite of what he had been told in college he would find. He was told in college that, oh, man lived a short, brutish life where we died at 21. Disease-ridden, horrible, terrible life. And it was only in the Iron Age that everything got good. Okay, 6,500 years ago when we finally domesticated cattle and agriculture and imperialism and a little war and some slavery. You know, that's when things got good. But he went back and he looked and he said, hey, wait a minute. I don't find any murders. I don't find any skulls have been bashed in. I don't find any rib cages with arrowheads in them. I look at the bones and I find out that these people lived to be 80, 85, 90 years old. No osteoporosis, no cavities in the teeth. Nothing like he was told that he would find when he began looking. And he came away saying, we are wrong. The people 15,000, 18,000 years ago were living a much better life than we're living. Less disease, more strength, everything exactly the opposite of what he's been told, which is why my slogan is, everything you know is wrong. So, and one of my good friends, Robert Lawler, who spent 20 years investigating the Australian Aborigines, living with them, reached the same conclusion. He said, an Aboriginal child can feed itself by the age of 3. It doesn't need its parents at the age of 3. It's gone. It can go out in the woods, go out in the tundra, and feed itself. It knows where all the food is. It knows where everything is. How many people in this room could do that? Or even get anywhere near that? We couldn't. So are we more advanced or are we less advanced? Do we believe the Archon's BS story that this is a much better place, this imitative world that they built for us? And I say it isn't. I say we need to get back to the garden. So, by the way, there's a direct correlation here to human life, but I want to your life, and I'll show you that in a second. When I was a young man, I had this idea that if I chased tornadoes around in the Midwest where I lived with my movie camera and captured a tornado on film, that I'd be able to sell it to NBC for $100,000. So I went around in my little Barracuda chasing tornadoes like a crazy person for 2 or 3 years. I never did get one on film, by the way. And, but I got to watch a lot of tornadoes. And I learned something about tornadoes which is analogous to this. And that's this. A tornado is nothing but air, like the air that's in this room. But as that air begins spinning, as it reaches verticular mass, the tip of the tornado is hard as a diamond. Just air. It's hard as a diamond. It can throw a semi 150 yards. It can throw a train, an engine of a train, up on end. It can shoot a chaff of wheat into an oak tree like a bullet. Okay? Spinning air. That's all it is. Okay? Well, time has a particle. And when it begins spinning, it hardens. Takes on a solidity. Time. So when you're out here in the golden age, time hardly has any meaning and you hardly have any substance. But as you fall closer towards the equator, inside the center of this baby, you start gaining density. You start getting harder. You start turning into an asshole, maybe. Because the center of this thing is what we think is real. But it isn't. It's a very little tiny part of the whole. This outside part is the part we should be looking at. By the way, the halo that you always see on Jesus and Mary, that's the top of this opening. It's right here. That's the part where you fold in and you die. It all folds in and starts going up this scoop. And it unfolds. So this thing falls to the ground, comes from this etheric field on the earth, and it falls to the ground, and when it can't go any further, you're born. Or the tree is born. Or the animal is born. And you live your whole life, and then when you die, that little part leaves, the weight leaves the whole thing, and you just rise back up. Just like the religion said. Religion comes from the Greek or the Latin word religio, which means simply to relink. So religion is not a dogma so much as an attempt to relink to something that we've lost. How did we lose it? Well, we lost it for one thing by going into the ignorance of the Iron Age, and we lost it also because the Iron Age was also the birth of the Archons, who may not be able to live in any other age but the Iron Age, by the way. Very important. So when you get down through the center of this thing, the Archons may disappear. So we started out 26,000 years ago, and we came through this hole from the last Iron Age, and everything was great. We're living in the Garden of Eden. Everybody's happy. Everything's going. Then 13,000 years ago, we passed over the lip was when the cataclysm happened, when all the extinctions happened. And this is what the Hopi are talking about, the end of their fourth world and the beginning of their fifth world. And time begins speeding up. Every second is faster than the second before, right? Even though it feels like it's just a second. If you're walking on the clock, it's still just a second, but it feels faster to you. When you hit the Iron Age, now you're going at such a rate, such a fast pace, that your reaction times are cut short. You don't have as much time to respond. Things are getting really dangerous at this point because anything could happen, okay? When we hit this point, we're right about here right now. When we hit that point where we are right now, there's almost no hope. There's no reaction time. Nobody can get out in front of a problem. It's impossible. It's impossible. The biggest hit film of our age, actually the biggest hit film of all time, is Titanic. And I couldn't figure out why anyone would want to go see the Titanic when it came out. It's like, oh, don't tell me the ending, And so, but everyone was going to it. So I said, okay, this is almost 11 years ago. So I said, okay, and so Sharon and I, we went to go see it. And it was a good movie. But I knew while watching it why it was the biggest hit of all time. Because it's about the Iron Age. It's an iron ship in the wilderness of the ocean. But we know it. We know the whole plot before we walked into the theater. Everybody knows it. But we're not interested in the plot. We're interested in how the end of time comes about. That's why we're watching the movie. So we watch this movie, and one of the first lines in the movie is, "Not even God himself can sink the Titanic." Well, we know right then we're in trouble. Okay, because human hubris is the cause of all problems, according to the Greeks. And so when the captain in the movie says, "Turn on all the engines," and the guy, "Oh, what about the icebergs?" "Ah, damn the icebergs," we're all like, "Oh no." So now he turns on the engines, and now his reaction times are really slim. In fact, they're so slim he can't get out of the problem. So he rams into the iceberg, and the whole ship sinks. The ship's divided into three classes. The lower class can't get out of the bottom. Middle class sits up on the top, and the upper class, of course, if anybody goes up in the upper class, they're arrested, right? And just like in our world. And we're divided, we don't want to talk to each other, and we are on this ship and we think that we're all that there is.